I was given this Maisto International DuraStar Flatbed truck by a friend who I was going to be printing some 3D printing some pallets for. And he sent me this so that I could get the scale right for the pallets. So this has been sitting on the bench ever since I did print the pallets. And I was looking at it, and well, I had another part that I had used a muscle machine that I had stripped the wheels off of. I think it was 2 builds back that I stripped the wheels off of. And I was looking at some concept drawings online. I had Googled to check some things out from Mad Max, and I was looking at that, and well, one thing led to another. So this thing, I apologize in advance. This is a long video, but this poor little truck went through a lot of things. There you can see the remnants of that other casting that I took the wheels off of. And yep, we're going Gaslands on this. We're going kind of post-apocalyptic. And again, we're kind of going off those concept drawings and away from Mad Max, but this is not trying to recreate anything from the movie. It's just using those for an idea. So I think I had a lot of pent-up frustration from not having used JB Weld and not using the jeweler saw and not using any CA glue for a few builds now, and well, they all come back with a vengeance in this one. So there, I chopped the top off the truck, and you can kind of see where I'm going here. Yep, I'm gonna mount the car to the top of the truck. It's going to be at a steeper angle than that. And I start using a lot of kit bashing things. Here I had that car off of a HO scale train, and I just like those tanks. You may recall a few builds back I used another tank off of a train, chopped it up, glued it together in the Ghostbusters build. This is a slightly different tank, slightly different train parts, but I bought a bunch of them inexpensively, and I figured I'd use them for something. I like taking parts from a lot of different things and gluing them together and seeing what I can come up with, and that's just works out really well for the Gasland style builds because, you know, they're in a post-apocalyptic environment, you're making do with what you can and using it in whatever ways you can come up with. And so that works out really well for someone who likes taking a lot of different kinds of crap and sticking it together, which I have to say I really enjoy. So, the Muscle Machines casting has a bunch of little plastic parts on it, so before I stripped the paint, I had to get those off of there. So I did strip the paint on the metal parts of the casting, both the body on here of the car, and all the hood was also fastened on there. I wanted to make sure that even though the hood's going to go back on the car, I just always like taking those off in the situation where they're mounted, just to make sure that the stripper doesn't get in there and it just makes things a mess. The only metal part on the truck itself was the cab unit that you saw me cutting. The rest of it was all plastic. So, strip the paint off those 2 chunks. As you'll see, the muscle machine itself does not have window openings. It has the recesses for the windows, and they're just, for lack of a better way of putting it, they're implied to be there, and they paint them black, which works out fine. Oh, there's my head in the shot again. Yeah, that's not a caterpillar at the side of the screen there crawling up a hill. That's my eyebrow. So what I like to do before I get serious with the JB Weld is I like to tack things down with the CA glue and make sure that it's looking the way I want it to look before it gets serious with the JB Weld, where there's generally no coming back from that. When you just tack it with the CA glue, you can always bust that tack open and re-tack it again. I found that the best way to do these things. Works best for me. In this build, I do use a variety of things. I apologize. I didn't realize my head was in this shot so often. It's like I'm trying to see these things, and I'm getting old, and I don't see as well as I used to, and I just want to make sure I have it straight. I'm going to hit it here with some accelerant. The car, not my head. There we go. If you don't use this stuff, you don't have the stuff, you need to get it, because it just instantly cures the CA glue, which in this case, I would have been waiting forever for it to dry. So at this point, I basically have the basic concept of what I want. And so it's time to bust out the JB Weld. You'll notice I used tape to cover it. There was a gap in the opening between the body of the car and the cab. I used tape to cover that. I used tape to cover the wheel wells on the car as well. And this is actually the first application of JB Weld. This is really the main application of the JB Weld. This really holds the two pieces together the way I want them to do. I want it to be held together. The tape, it's an interesting thing with JB Weld that I've run across, is you can cover up openings like the wheel wells on the car, and then there you can kind of see the wheel wells kind of where my thumb is down at the bottom of that shot. But anyhow, when you use the JB Weld and you cover openings like that, it almost makes a flat body panel for you. It like truly does finish off the body. It does it very smoothly. It does it very well, having the tape there, and then you just peel off the tape after the JB Weld is cured. It works fantastically. So at this point, I'm putting back on the chrome pieces of the car. Again, this is a dark build. I kind of think of it as darkness falling on the wasteland. And it's not this doesn't have a lot of color to it when it's finished. I was looking at this as being a very dark build based upon those concept drawings I saw. I really liked how they looked. So there's not a lot of chrome on this finished build. There's nothing like that. So I went ahead and glued in these chrome pieces now, because they're going to get spray painted here in a little bit anyway. You notice at the top left, the wheels, those are designed by Sable Badger. I belong to his Patreon page, and he has some fantastic designs, and I ended up using those wheels on this build. I just printed a bunch of them. It was nice because I needed to rescale the front ones, and so it's nice being able to scale things when you're 3D printing them to be the size you want. I needed to flatten down the front of the truck because there you see it. What I wanted was a steam train cow catcher on the front of that thing. And so that I also 3D printed to the size I wanted. I pulled out the dimensions. Obviously, I dragged out the front quite a ways. I wanted it to be exceptionally pointy. I had another one that I end up sticking on the back of the truck just because I wanted to. I do foresee this pulling a trailer at some point. That is not part of this build, but I made certain that if I did put a trailer back there, the cow catcher that I put on the back wouldn't interfere with the trailer, and it won't. So I had to chop off part of the bumper on the front of this truck. I wanted to keep the radiator grill section. Had to cut off the bumper because the cow catcher was going on there. So throw that puppy on there and hit it with the accelerant. Here I'm putting on the back one with the accelerant as well. So you kind of see where we're going with this. And then there's those tanks again from the HO scale train. This, yeah, I know it's not a pretty cut. It's not a straight cut. It's not a pretty cut. It's all I really wanted was the fronts of those tanks to stick out, and so they didn't really need to be even on the back side since all of that is pretty much hidden. I do file them down to get them a little straighter, and I just wanted the design from the top of those tanks, and you'll see what I'm doing here in a minute. But I used 4 of them. Cut those up. Yeah, kids, don't cut like that. Don't do what I'm doing. Never do that. It's a good way to lose a finger. Yeah, it would have made filled in for a missing tank if I needed one, but don't do that. So that's where I wanted the tanks to go, and there I'm using the plastic weld cement. And basically, on a build like this, you have to fit and refit things, hundreds of times. And that cab always would fight me when I was dropping into the body there. But there I ended up using to back the tanks and to make it so you couldn't see straight through the truck. Those were a couple of rafts. When you 3D print on a PLA printer, you can choose to print with a raft, which is basically a flat base that then it prints up from, and then you peel off that base. Well, nothing is trash. Everything can be used, and so that's basically something that typically would end up in the trash, but in this case it didn't. I also had a little stack of 3D printed diamond plate that I decided to cut up and use on this as well. And so that's what I put to cover the back side of those tanks. And then I also wanted to cover up that area where it used to have the sliding car ramp on the truck. Obviously, I wasn't going to be using that anymore. And so I thought, well, I'll cover that with diamond plate. I'll cover the frame rails that are coming off the back with diamond plate. A lot of this is just trying to make it interesting by putting in a lot of detail. And I like getting that detail from a lot of different sources. And so not everything is 3D printed. The 3D printing does make it convenient for certain things. I like the wheels. I love those, the design that Sable Badger has. But, if push come to shove, I do have some other wheels I could have used, but I specifically chose not to. But there's a lot of sources for wheels. These I just really like. I thought these fit this build exceptionally well. But if you don't have a 3D printer, obviously, there's a number of alternatives you could take. This just happened to work in this case. And there I'm just going the underside as well. That was where the rail was that sliding bed came off of. So now, if you see that center black portion there, that's another piece of diamond plate that I put in that fills in the gap between the car and the front of the hood of the truck. And I just like the look of that recess, and you'll see it when it's done. But yep, it's time to bust out the JB Weld again, and I'm using it to hold that in place, even though I had used the CA glue to tack it in. Again, I'm using the tape because there were some areas that I wanted to fill in and have essentially an epoxy metal type body filler on it. And so, and then I was just also just using the JB Weld to be using JB Weld, strengthening the hell out of this body because I wanted to make absolutely certain that car wasn't going to go anywhere. I decided I wanted the back to be dualies on this. I thought about putting double axles on the back and then the single axle up front. Decided against it. Decided just to go with the doubles, the dualies in the back, and there I am just basically gluing the wheels together and instantly having dualies. And there's things like this that you realize how convenient 3D printing can be. And honestly, at least with the PLA, it's basically a plastic filament printer. This is not resin printed. This is like that plastic string printing. And it works fantastically and it's really inexpensive. And then things I love are old model parts. And then I have a box of Citadel Skulls, which I don't put skulls on very many builds, but this needed them. So this called out for it. And you see some model part right above it there at the very bottom of the screen, right below the car. That's an old model part I glued on there. I just like scrounging through the old parts and sticking them on where I can. And then the exhaust coming out of the rear wheel wells of the car are actually the original muscle machine exhaust, just moved to that location. At the front edges of the car, where it meets with the truck cab, I used a couple of old model pieces there as well. I just love doing that stuff. It's fun. I coated it with that's trying to blank. That's Rust-Oleum flat black paint. Coated it with that. Actually, I hit it with Army Painter primer first, black primer, and then went over it with the Rust-Oleum flat black. Did the wheels as well. And then I thought, for this one, I wanted to try the Tamiya weathering powders. It seemed to be a natural. I am going a very dark look on this build. It reminded me, this is going to sound stupid to some of you, but I hope some of you get it. This has a Batman feel to it. And I think it's because it's this flat black color with sharp angles. It just reminds me of like Batman meeting Gaslands in a way. It's kind of crazy. I'm sure some of you are just shaking your heads, but when I got to this point, that's when it hit me. And that's how I started then applying the dusting powders. I did not go crazy on this thing. But I wanted some details to show. I weathered it in a lot of locations on the body with it. I bring out the cow catcher on the front and the back using the silver powders. One thing I should mention now, because I don't think I show it in the video. If I remember right, I didn't have video of it. Like I said, on the car casting itself, there are no openings for the windows. They're just recessed. What I ended up doing on the windows, obviously it's flat black, so painting the windows black to say, oh, well, that's where the windows are, is ridiculous. It's not going to show any difference. So I mixed up black Citadel paint with white and blue to make it an off black color. So it's not this flat black. It has this bluish cast to it. And then what I end up doing, and I do think I showed this, but I'll discuss it now. I go over it with micro crystal clear, which gives it a high shine. It gives it a thick glass-like appearance. And so that will be really the only shiny thing when you see this as being finished. I do the weathering powders. I get it where I want it. I went over it with Rust-Oleum flat clear, a matte clear cover to make sure the weathering powders stay in place, to make sure everything works out right. There you can kind of see the diamond plate in front of the car on the cab. I went around the window trim there with the silver weathering powders. And then I really liked doing the center of the wheels with the weathering powders too. I thought that made it look pretty good. And then I also go over it with some Citadel. It's like a tan color. I don't recall what it is. Trying to have some dirt kicked up from the wheels. But I didn't go crazy with it. I didn't want it to make it look like this thing had been just running through the mud constantly. I still wanted it to look reasonably clean in a way. So anyhow, that's what I ended up doing. The micro crystal clear on the glass gives it a shiny effect. Here's where I did the micro crystal clear. And I think I only show you one window. But it ends up being really the only high gloss feature on this build. And you have to wait for it to dry. And so then I did that after doing the flat coat, because obviously I wanted the glass to be shiny. So back to where we started. This poor little truck had no idea what it was in for. But I really enjoy the post-apocalyptic builds. And it really hits that part in me where I can take a bunch of crap and stick it together and make interesting things out of the pieces and bring detail to these with the pieces. And here's where it ends up. And you can kind of see the reflection of the simulated glass. And then everything else is basically flat. The two sides are similar yet different. There are differences between the two sides of the truck. They're subtle, but they are there to like the right of those tanks. There's some piping that's in there towards the back. You'll see right at the front by the windshield of the truck, there's two pieces that are raised that are different. The panels, the welding panels that bring the two pieces together, theoretically the mending plates, are different on the two sides. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are some glamour shots here coming up. This was a kick in the pants to build. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did doing it. Thank you for watching the video, and to my subscribers, thank you very much for subscribing and putting up with me through these builds. And if you enjoyed this and are not a subscriber, click the subscribe button. There will be more of all of these kinds of builds, pretty ones and weird ones and happy ones and strange ones. Thanks for watching. Everybody stay safe and healthy out there. Catch you in the next one.